Welcome to John Bryan State Park in lovely Southwest Ohio. I'm glad you're able to join me today. I want to talk to you about the risk management process. This bike here taught me everything I need to know about the risk management process. DoD Guide on Risk Management, 5 key steps. Plan, identify, analyze, handle, and monitor. And this bike taught me, first of all, I didn't do a good job planning. I'll share that story with you here in just a second. First thing you got to do is identify the risks, and that's what I didn't do a good job of doing. One risk I did identify is if I fall, I could die if I hit my head. So I mitigate the consequence of that risk by wearing this helmet. Always wear your helmet when you ride. It's the second risk that got me. The second risk was what happens if I get a flat tire. If I get a flat tire, I could be stranded. The likelihood of me getting a flat tire, putting about 1,000 miles a year on this bike, is actually pretty high. The consequences, I might get stranded. And this is where my true story comes in. I was TDY at Fort Leavenworth. One evening, I decided to go for a ride. I go 23 miles out, 2 miles back, I get a flat. And I'm stranded. 20 miles from my destination. No one to call. I had to figure out how to get home. At that point, I decided, boy, I got to have a better handling strategy if I get a flat tire. And that's why I start looking at analysis. Analysis is looking at what's the likelihood and what's the consequence of any given risk that you've identified. So the likelihood, pretty high. The consequence, I may have a long walk to go. So the fourth step is how am I going to handle that? I have 4 choices. I can just accept it, which I did in this case, and unfortunately, it was only because I didn't plan very well. I can transfer it. Maybe I can have someone drive behind me so that if I do get a flat, they can pick me up and take me back. Also, probably not a really good strategy. The third one, avoid, I could just drive around in circles. That's no fun. I'm going to significantly impact my operations that way. The fourth one is mitigate. How do I mitigate it? I can mitigate likelihood or the consequences. So, the first thing I did was mitigate the likelihood. I went out and purchased one of these tubes. These tubes are self-sealing up to 1/8 of an inch puncture wound. So the likelihood now of me getting a flat is greatly reduced. Now, like any mitigation strategy, comes with a cost. These tubes cost about 30% more than your standard tube. The second thing I wanted to look at was the consequence. Okay, so say I hit a 1/4 inch puncture. I'm still stranded. So I got to look at my consequence. How can I mitigate the consequence? So now I carry this bag and I have a spare tire in it, air, and some tire irons so that if I do get a flat, I can fix it. Now, it's still going to take me 10-15 minutes to get back on the road, but I'm not stranded. So I've significantly reduced the consequences. Comes at a cost. Each one of these things costs money. Comes at a performance. Now I've got to carry this extra weight. I've got this extra weight up front. So any kind of risk you're looking at as well. Risk mitigation strategy. Look at what it costs in terms of cost, schedule, and performance. Lastly, I got to monitor my risk. So that's the last step. I go off and I decide to go ride now in the Rocky Mountains. I might have a whole different group of risks involved. I'm going to continue to look at my risks. So look at those 5 steps. That's what I challenge you to do at your program. You have a good risk management plan. Have you identified the risks? Have you got the right people together to identify the risks? Have you analyzed those risks for the likelihood of them happening? What are the consequences if they do happen? And based on that, have you picked the appropriate handling strategy and you continue to monitor those risks?